Sometimes your body might betray you, and you may have so much to lose. But if you pay attention and you just take some action, you realize it's all in your mind. It's in your mind, so mind your health. It's in your mind, so mind your health. Your physical is essential, but your mind is super special. So mind your health.
Welcome to Mind Your Health, where there is no health without emotional health. My name is Leslie Ann Lyons, and today we have Dr. Atkinson joining us via Zoom. We're tackling the topic, children and mental health. We'll delve a little further into the conversation when we get back, but first we're going to have our scripture and prayer.
The scripture reading for this evening comes to us from Matthew 18, verse 10. And it says, "Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones, for I say unto you, that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven." Let us pray. Dear most loving and compassionate Father, we give you thanks for another day. We give you thanks for health, strength, and for this ministry. I pray that you will continue to be with each and every person, be with every person's family members, and I pray that you will help this ministry and this mission to bless hearts. In your name I pray, amen.
Thank you for staying with us here at Mind Your Health. This evening we have two lovely guests with us. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. You're going to give us your name and your position and your title. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jolene Gunnis. Currently, I'm a guidance counselor in Portmore.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Douglas. I am a trained graduate and a teacher at the secondary level and I also teach mathematics.
Thank you so much for joining us. And at this time, I'm going to ask Dr. Atkinson to take over a little bit here. Go ahead, Dr. Atkinson.
It's so exciting to be joining you from Zoom. And today we have even more voices to add to the conversation around mental health in childhood. What we know is that 10 to 20% of the global population of children grapple with mental health conditions. As early as 14 years, half of the mental health conditions have already been expressed. And by early 20s, 75% of mental health conditions would have begun. Now, this is critical because we know that 70% of the children and adolescents with mental health issues are not getting the treatment that they need at the earliest age that would be beneficial. And when these services are not provided, when these resources are not provided, it has long-range impacts on the quality of life of the children and as they age to adulthood. And so today I'm just thrilled that we have these auspicious guests to join us in this conversation around mental health and children. But let's just start with a conversation around what are some of the mental health concerns or issues that children and adolescents grapple with.
Anyone want to tackle that? Mr. Douglas?
All right, I will begin by saying I believe one of the mental health problems that children face is the identity crisis. And I would like to take something from Erik Erikson's developmental theory. In his theory, in the stage 5 of the theory, he says, when adolescents are apathetic, which means that they show a lack of emotion, they do not make a conscious search for identity or are pressured to conform to their parents' ideas for the future. They may develop a weak sense of self and experience role confusion. They will be unsure of their identity and confused about the future. Teenagers who struggle to adopt a positive role will likely struggle to find themselves as adults. And this goes to show that when it is that children, especially in the classroom, you have a lot of students that are really trying to find themselves. You have a lot of students that are unsure of who they are and whose they are. All right,
Yes.
so that's one.
And that is such a critical piece, because we know, if we can recall our earlier days, that this is a universal quandary where we're trying to figure out, who am I, who do I want to be, what are the things that are valuable and important to me. And we can certainly have an anchor in our identity as first God's children, and then our family of origin and those kinds of things. So those are normative experiences that children and adolescents will navigate throughout their lives. And it's interesting because we talk about this in relation to children, but there are also seasons of adulthood where we start to ask and revisit some of these questions as well. You know, we know that children can also grapple with issues like mood conditions, whether it's depression or anxiety, just persistent fears and worries about different aspects of their lives, whether it's school or being fearful about particular objects or events. Some have social anxiety, some have persistent sadness. These are just some of the concerns. But when we talk about children and adolescents as well, and some of those issues that they navigate, there are also developmental concerns. So some have learning challenges that are persistent. Some have pretty severe attentional and concentration problems. And these become more concerning because they interfere with their capacity to function in the classroom and to form relationships and to stay on task as they engage in different settings in their lives. Do you, Miss Godness, have any additional thoughts about what might be some concerns that might emerge in childhood and adolescence?
There are many different factors that might emerge during childhood and adolescence. With childhood, I think one of the things that is very important in childhood is having a good family structure. If they don't have that kind of structure, some children cannot learn, some children cannot develop. And if they live in an environment that is very turmoil, then they're going to have a lot of issues in the future. Sometimes those issues, they recess until they reach into adulthood, and we don't deal with them at the point, and when we're supposed to deal with them, that is during the youth, right? And then they regress, and then they stem out in adulthood, and they're worse, and sometimes they can't be treated at that point, or it takes a longer time to be treated. So there are many different things, especially in the school setting that I am. I have a lot of them to deal with on a daily basis. I try, but sometimes we just have to refer them because it doesn't work out, and they need more help than I can give at that point.
Right. Thank you so much. And so there's just a range of mental health issues that children can grapple with, from mood issues to learning problems to cognitive problems to developmental problems. Some children have deficits when it comes on to communication and social functioning. Some have concerns with image and eating behaviors, and there's a range of severity around that. You know, there might be some idiosyncrasies, but we know that there's need for focused attention when it's contributing to impairment that gets in the way of them being able to meet their milestones, to attend to their academic and social commitments, their daily living tasks, those kinds of things. And so this is just a general overview of some things that children might grapple with, but they're more than we can name. We could actually spend the whole program identifying different mental health conditions and disorders. But I am curious to kind of talk with the team around how mental health conditions can look differently by gender and by age. Is it different? Is it identical, for example, for boys and girls, for early childhood versus adolescence? Those are some questions that I'd want us to broach.
So the question was, are there differences in the genders in terms of childhood as it relates to the mental health?
Well, personally for me, I've seen there are many differences between boys and girls. I used to be the adventure director at my church. So I used to work with, there was a group. I taught them for years. Unfortunately, every year that I worked, I ended up back with this group, right? So I saw the changes in them, right? It was the girls. The girls were quiet at that point, right? The boys were rambunctious and they gave trouble and they had their issues and they didn't want to learn. Everything was hard for them. You know, they were having a lot of problems, right? And then they went into the pre-adolescent stage and they went over into Pathfinder. And unfortunately, I ended up with them down at the junior class, that is at summer school. And wow, it was a different change. It was the girls now that were giving the most trouble. They had many different issues. They wanted to complain about everything. They quarreled, they were bitter, they were miserable. And the boys, they were taking things calmer at that point. Okay. They were willing to listen and understand, you know, if there's an issue, they were more willing to sit and speak with you at that point, right? But the girls, they didn't want to hear. They thought that they knew everything and, oh, I reached this age and I'm a teenager. And you know, that was their thing. So you couldn't speak to them about certain things, certain mannerisms, certain attitudes that came along, right? But you could see, and I wanted to help them because I realized they were struggling a bit, especially like with identity, who they were, you know, certain things, the body image, the body perception, everything was going on for them at that time. But the boys, they would come and listen and they would understand. And I'm thinking that, oh, I'm a female, I should be able to reason with the girls more. And they were not giving me any, like, they were making it hard on me, and I was getting frustrated. I said, no, I wonder if I really want to do this. I wonder if this is really my role, you know, to be a guidance counselor. I was getting frustrated, but it is different, right? The boys, they will be very aggressive and, you know, too much in the younger stage, because even at school I do have them and they're very aggressive. But as they get older, they settle down and they listen more than the girls. Okay. There's two different things. You see a 180 change in both of them by the adolescent stage. Okay. Mr. Douglas, any thoughts on that?
I agree with what you're saying, Sister Gunis. With regard to the boys, as you said, are more aggressive. And they can be sometimes antisocial as well with their behaviors than the girls. But the girls now, they more internalize their decision making. They internalize things differently. They think about who they are affecting and stuff like that. So I would say there's a slight difference there. Although yes, I think that the girls are now catching up to the boys regarding to the aggressiveness, but yes, but
in the teenage stage. Yes.
But yeah, there's a slight difference there.
Okay.
Well, when we look at children relative to adults, what we know is that we're having more conduct-related concerns in childhood as opposed to in adulthood, and that boys tend to be more externalizing. So there are more oppositional behaviors, more conduct-related behaviors, more concerns even with certain expressions of attentional problems like ADHD. And some of the developmental concerns tend to be expressed more prominently in the boys relative to the girls. And that there are shifts, as the other two guests mentioned, as they age. So with girls tending to have more like mood-related concerns expressed in the classical internalizing way, so the depressive symptoms, the anxiety symptoms, and the eating concerns that is associated with the ongoing questions around identity and how that can look differently. Also, that boys and male adolescents tend to complete suicides more, but that the females will attempt or talk about wanting to end their lives more frequently. And so just kind of noticing that whereas as a whole, both in childhood, they're very kind of poised for mental health conditions, or mental health issues, that it can be expressed differently along the age spectrum and by gender. And so that's important for the parents and the caregivers and the Sabbath school and Pathfinder leaders, as Sister Gunness was referencing earlier. And you mentioned several times, Sister Gunness, unfortunately, but I know that it was a gift for the young people to have you serving them because of the passion and interest and dedication. And I bet they kept you frequently on your knees. Right. and that is something for us to kind of think about as we minister and try to encourage parents and caregivers, that children are not just young adults. They are developing in all the important domains, and they often do not have the language that adults have. And so they're expressing themselves in the ways that they can. And so it requires more patience and effortfulness from the adults with their hopefully well-formed frontal lobes. That's better with judgment and formal planning to help the teens and the children navigate frustrating and challenging times. But what are some of those warning signs? What are some of those warning signs that I might be engaging a child or an adolescent who is at risk of or potentially developing a mental health concern or issue?
All right, for me, some warning sign is persistent behavior. The persistent behavior is a change, right? You can see a change in their behavior. Once you see that, and it's not just something from a traumatic experience, because children do have traumatic experiences, right? And that is a one-off situation, and you know how to help them through that. However, some children just have a drastic change in behavior, whether it is they become very aggressive, very hostile towards you. They weren't that way before, and there's no situation that caused that. And it's now persistent, it's constantly happening. Or they have persistent sadness, right? They're always sad, they can't tell you why they're sad, but it's just there constantly. Those are some of the things. Anything, Brother Christopher?
Yes, I'm glad you touched on the affective domain, because I'm going to look at the cognitive, where it affects their grades as well. The changes in their academic performance. A student that is normally getting a 90 average, performing well in school, and all of a sudden there's a sudden drop in performance, then it is a cause for concern, because then it could be something that is going on in the home that's affecting the child mentally. It could be anything. It could be even a situation at school where a child is grappling with self-esteem problems, identity problems, bullying as well. So it could be any one of those.
Okay. I just wanted to add, I'm glad you made that point, because from a personal stance, I remember when I was in high school at the time, I think, there was a friend of mine, and I mean, I think about it now, and it was relatively simple, but there was a friend of mine who I was really close to at the time, and she was leaving to go to another country. And it affected me, greatly. I could see it in my work. And I remember I went home and I said to my mother, when I got my grades back after the term, she's like, what's happening with your grades? Because I'm not, a student that slacks off per se. And she's like, so what's happening with your grades? And I'm like, Mommy, my friend left, and I think that affected me. And even though she was maybe sympathetic towards me, she couldn't understand it exactly. And so I'm really glad you made that point. You can see it in the grades and in the behavior changes as well. Yeah.
And that's another thing, because sometimes we don't, as adults also, we don't realize that children do have issues, right? We tend to blow their issues off and say, that's not nothing. So, when your mother, she might have sympathized with you, she didn't really understand that that was something that really affected you. Right. So much so to the point that your grades were slipping and you couldn't focus, and you couldn't do what you needed to do at school. But for adults, we sometimes forget that children do have feelings, do have emotions, and they do, if we cannot handle certain situations, we can't expect children who are just developing to understand and handle the situation that we as adults sometimes can't handle, right? And that is where we sometimes fail our children, because we don't realize that, children have issues too, and we have to deal with them. And if we don't deal with them now, they're going to affect them when it comes to adulthood.
Yeah.
Indeed. And, the important caveat is let's watch for changes. When we see changes in appetite, changes in sleep, changes in grades, concentration difficulties, shifts in mood, behaviors, these are telltale signs that there's something going on that the children and adolescents might not be able to verbalize, might not be able to make the connection, but they're indicators that they need additional support and intervention. If you have a child that has suddenly and drastically changed in any way, that is an indicator that this isn't about the child just suddenly. People don't just suddenly drastically change for no reason.
Right.
Even if they're not expressing it, even if they're maybe fearful to express it or not sure how, it's an invitation for us to extend even more care and nurturing because something is amiss. And so there are usually some signs that for the perceptive person to note and to intervene around.
At this time, we're going to take another break as we have a musical item by Sarah Watson.
All I had to give was a broken heart, torn apart. That's all I had to give. All I had to give was empty hope and promises. That's all I had to give. But in return, he gave me joy that could never be told. And in return, he gave me love that was more precious than gold. So whatever you have to give, you don't have to be ashamed. Just come as you are and present it in Jesus' name. For in return of a torn life, he'll give you life abundantly. And in return of a raging storm, the Lord will calm the sea. So whatever you have, the Lord has so much more. So what do you have to give? Oh, if you were like me, you didn't have a lot of gold, position or money, you didn't owe what untold. Oh, and glad he didn't look all the things that I have, but he looked all the things he was able to give me. Oh, for in return he'll give you joy that could never be told. And in return, he'll give you love
Thank you so much for that musical item. That was beautiful. In return, what do you have to give? We are here on Mind Your Health, and we're discussing the topic children and mental health. Dr. Atkinson, take us into the rest of the discussion.
Yes, so we're continuing with warning signs. I think there are two warning signs that I think it's important for us to pay attention to when it comes down to children and mental health concerns. One, another indicator that a child is grappling with something extraordinary is that you're noticing that their play has shifted. I remember treating with a child who was the typical 8-year-old would play with dolls in much the same way as the typically developing child would. But then parents noted that her play became more sexualized. So she was verbalizing and making references to sexual talk in a way that was not typical for her. And on investigation, it was discovered that she was actually being assaulted, sexually assaulted. The child hadn't verbalized it directly to any other living soul, but her play was demonstrating that this was something that was going on that was extraordinary. Also, that there was some regression. You know, a child who has long gone through the concerns of being able to wake up as needed, to urinate as needed, is now bedwetting, is more clinging than normal, is more withdrawn, socially withdrawn, or more excessively attached. Those are some indicators, some warning signs that there might be something amiss. And so we're just kind of continuing on what are some things that I can look for, notice to let me know that my child is navigating something new and challenging, or that a child at church or a nephew, just because we have to be vigilant and caring towards any child that we come in contact with, because God can strategically place us in the lives of children for a time such as this because they need somebody to intervene. But let's talk about what are some things that put children at risk for developing emotional problems. I think we've kind of hinted at some of it, but what are some things that can put children at risk? I think I can start the conversation by just emphasizing trauma. So when a child is exposed to sexual, physical, emotional violence, that frequently translates into notable emotional difficulties. It can contribute to mood concerns, as in depression, anxiety, but it can also translate into acting out behaviors. And so sometimes when we are engaging our adolescents and we're saying, but they're just so intolerable, they're just so unbearable, we have to notice what is the function of their behaviors, as opposed to it's unpleasant for us. What might their behaviors be communicating? Because sometimes these difficult and challenging behaviors are really their attempts to communicate to us that something isn't right, that they're hurting in a way that they cannot explain.
Okay. Another thing that I think about when I was talking about family structure earlier, it is one of the key things, especially if children are used to a 2-parent structure, and then all of a sudden daddy leaves or mommy leaves, and that tears them. They might not be able to express it, but that is one of the risk factors. I remember I had a little boy. He came to school last year in grade 2, and for him, his father said, "Miss, this is the 3rd school in 4 years that he has been to," right? And I'm saying, he was just saying, "Miss, him just bad," right? And I said, "No, I don't think children are just bad. Right. I don't believe in that kind of thing." Yeah. So I usually sit with him. we color, we talk, and I gave him the opportunity to talk to me. He had some really angry moments and he needed to calm down. So he'd usually come to me and when he wants to calm down. So over a period of time, he starts talking. I realized that mommy and daddy used to live together. It was when he was born, he's the first child, right? And mommy and daddy was together, and then they had another little brother. And mommy and daddy was still together. But mommy now, so she can't bother with daddy no more, so she moved out, right? She left them with the father. She left him with the father, and she took the little one. Mommy got pregnant again. And mommy excited about this pregnancy, and she also was paying the little one attention, but she was not paying this 7-year-old any attention whatsoever, right? And the funny thing is that mommy actually moved next door to him. So when he went next door to look for mommy said, "Go back home to your father. Me don't want you over here, sir." Right? And he could not understand why this mother, he was feeling so much rejection that he would take it out on everybody at his schools. And so nobody took the time to understand what was really going on. Them just say, "Miss him bad, I can't bother, him can't stay at my school." And that is everything that they gave the father. And so the father in turn started to say, "Miss him just bad." But that was not the case. It was the rejection that he was feeling. It caused him to be so angry, and it stirred up so much anger within him and resentment for females and so. The only thing why he did not have a resentment to me is that his mother was brown and she had a, color, and I'm just dark, so me don't have no look like him, but I don't have any resemblance to his mother. But his teacher had a resemblance to his mother, and he hated the teacher. He would fight her on a daily basis, right? So family structure is very, very important, right? And when that is broken, children become very broken.
One risk factor that I find, especially through my experience, is that students would normally have long-standing educational difficulties. For example, with the subject that I teach, mathematics, students on a whole don't like math. When they say, "All right, I'm going to math class, head start hurting, chest hurting, chest pain, stomach pain, all sorts of pain." All right, but when I even said to them that math is not hard, it's actually easy, they said, "No, sir, it's not. It's hard because of it's too much things to remember and stuff like that." So it could be because of prior experiences too. It could be because of methodologies that teachers use. It could be because of their own experience learning it, that they never had a hands-on experience with it and stuff. So that could be one of the risk factors as well.
Yeah, I think from the very little experience I have, I was actually doing practicum, and I went to a school, and there was this child who the teacher said to me, I was doing group sessions, but the teacher said to me that this one, he was fine, because he was in grade 3, I think, at the time. He was fine for the first 2 years. But then when grade 3 began, him just started going bad. And this is how it was expressed to me. And I was saying something clearly isn't adding up. And so one of the exercises that I had them do was we did some drawings. Draw some experiences that were probably negative for you, and work through how we deal with that kind of thing. And I looked at his drawing, and I was very confused by it. And when I asked him to explain, there was an issue with molestation over the summer. And I was like, there it is. And so I think there's things that are happening behind the scenes. And one of the things that I think I realized in that moment too is that as caregivers, as parents, as teachers, as guidance counselors, whoever we are, as more senior, we have to take the time to spend with the children to actually understand what is happening. I mean, just brushing them off and saying, them not have no problem, so them good, isn't going to work. So it's actually spending the time to get the information, to find out what is happening behind the scenes would really help to understand more of what's happening. At this time, though, we need to take another break. And so we're going to have another song by the wonderful Sarah Watson. She's been such a blessing so far, and I pray that this song will also help us to aid in the discussion as we continue.
Little boy, 6 years old, a little too used to being alone. Another new mom and dad, another school, another house that'll never be home. When people ask him how he likes this place, he looks up and says with a smile upon his face, "This is my temporary home. It's not where I belong. Windows and rooms that I'm passing through. This is just a stop on the way to where I'm going. I'm not afraid because I know this is my temporary home." Young mom on her own, she needs a little help, got nowhere to go. She is looking for a job, looking for a way out, 'cause a halfway house will never be a home. At night she whispers to her baby girl, "Someday we'll find our place here in this world. This is our temporary home. It's not where we belong. Windows and rooms that we're passing through. This is just a stop on the way to where we're going. I'm not afraid because I know this is my temporary home." Old man, hospital bed. The room is filled with people he loves. And he whispers, "Don't cry for me. I'll see you all someday." He looks up and says, "Soon I'll see God's face. This is my temporary home. It's not where I belong. Windows and rooms that I'm passing through. This is just a stop on the way to where I'm going. I'm not afraid because I know this is my temporary home." Oh, this is our temporary home. This is our temporary home.
Thank you so much for that song. This is our temporary home. Such a timely reminder. This is our temporary home. Thank you for staying with us here at Mind Your Health as we continue the conversation about children and mental health. Dr. Atkinson.
Yes, so we're continuing on the risk factors that predispose children to mental health conditions. And I want to first continue that discussion by bringing to the fore two two experiences that I have found to be very central. So the residential instability. Sometimes it's homelessness, sometimes it's shifting, the frequent shifting from one home to the next. This can occur when parents migrate or when children are shifted from one caregiver to the next. And sometimes the quality of caregiving is vastly different, where they're not feeling cared for or their needs are less well met, and that can leave children being preoccupied with the just the survival matters that they shouldn't have to be grappling with on their own, not feeling the emotional connection that they so need at this critical time in their lives, when there's severe deprivation of their physical needs, so not being able to consistently not having their needs for nutrients like meals and shelter being satisfied. That can certainly predispose children to emotional difficulties and can predispose them to bullying by peers, which by itself increases the emotional tensions and reactions. And then just being in a home with parents who have severe mental illnesses or significant substance abuse problems, just because of the instability that provides. When parents are not able to provide the material and emotional support that children so need at this important developmental stage, it can really contribute to um, notable emotional difficulties. But are there other experiences from your professional and personal experiences that you've noted that has contributed to emotional difficulties in children?
One major one is is death,
Yes.
especially death of a parent, right? And since I have been at this school, I've seen death of parents, right? Parents that have been close to these children, parents that are the main breadwinners for these children. And for that to happen, children really get into this emotional state. I remember there was a little girl. There were two of them. Their father died. The bigger sister, she understood at the point, but the younger one did not understand, right? She was a little bit too young. She was in grade 2 when he died. When she came back in grade 3 now, she realized what was really happening. Daddy is gone for good. She's not seeing him again, nothing like that, and she started to feel depressed, right? She wasn't able to function in class. She would do no work. She wanted to sleep. She would not function at home, right? I did not have much sessions with her. I had a few sessions with her. However, she would come to my office very often, and I'd just sit and hug her. If I have lunchtime, I'd spend my lunchtime and hug and talk to her. And we, play games. She show me her crayons, because she even bring her crayons come so she can show me, and she show me what she draws. And so, and then in a few weeks, I got a letter, right? The letter came from her mother. And I read the letter, and it said, "Miss Gunnis, you have no idea what kind of impact you made on my daughter. For weeks, I've been trying to figure out what is happening. I did not realize that she was so depressed. It wasn't until she came and she said that she's been spending time with you that I realized how severe the matter was. And she thanked me for spending the time to help her, because she said she could not do it alone and she did not know what to do. And she was also struggling at that point because she had lost her significant other. So she was struggling as well, and she did not know how to help. So she was really grateful for the help that we could give. And death of a parent is not something to be taken lightly. Yes. Trust me. If I can handle it, and when my father died, I was an adult. I was almost 30. and I could not handle it. So I can imagine what children go through. They might be doubling the pain that I feel because they have lost them at an early stage when they're just developing, just getting to know them, just spending time.
Right.
I said to everybody, I spent a lot of time with my father. My father did a lot of things for me, and so I can always be grateful. So when I see children lose their parents, I feel so sad, and I understand, and I can empathize with them, because at that age I wouldn't have wanted to have had that major loss.
Adding to that as well, having to deal with death, the death of a parent, it will now thrust the child now into start taking up adult responsibilities. The boys become the men of the house. The women become the quote unquote mothers of the house. They take care of their siblings. They carry them to school. They take on that role, and that in and of itself can affect that child, because they will be no preoccupied thinking about, okay, I have to do this, I have to wake up at this time so that I can carry my sister or my brother to school.
Or
I can
cook,
or
or
even-
wash.
Yes.
Yes, because I've heard children even at my level, they're saying that they have to wash for the younger one. They have to get the younger one ready for school. And I'm saying, but that's not your responsibility. But based on the situation, there's a
to
debt.
confront, yeah.
Right. Now they have to adjust to that. And so they're no longer children, and they can't do the things that children can do. They have to be doing the adult things.
And it then goes into the education and throws off their education and stuff. Otherwise,
Yes, everything is thrown off by that.
And it's further complicated when there are chronic physical conditions that the children are grappling with, or if they have a caregiver, primary caregiver with a significant physical health condition. When a child has to be frequently hospitalized and medicated, this, because childhood by itself has its own vulnerability. Children are less physically able to do things as adults. They have less power in most relationships. It can be so crippling because they're now distinguished not only from adults but from their peers. And depending on their peer groups and how they're engaged, it can really impact how they see themselves relative to their peers, how worthwhile and valuable they see themselves, and also depending on the physical condition, the medications that they have to take for their treatment, the amount of pain and discomfort and disability that brings. For example, if they have a physical disability, that impacts emotional wellness as well. And so it's just appreciating that whenever there is increased demands in any domain of functioning for a child, where they're not just able to just navigate the normal developmental challenges of being a child, that it imposes an additional emotional load that then predisposes them to emotional difficulties. But we've been talking about the risk factors. Let's transition to what are some things that enhance resilience, because we, as parents, let's just be honest. I'm not a parent yet, but hopefully soon I'll be, right? If I am from a lower economic status, my child, and I have children, although I'm going to give them the best that I have to offer them, they might still be growing in a context of poverty. That by itself doesn't mean that they are going to experience emotional difficulties. Even if I have to shift their caregiving context because of just what life throws at me, even if they lose a parent, what are some things that we can do as parents, as aunts and uncles and Pathfinder leaders, as church members, to nurture and enhance the resilience of children? Well, the first thing is just for us to spend the time to provide a context where children can feel heard. A reminder, children are not just young, they're not just little adults. They're still developing, and it requires effort for us to create a climate where they can feel safe to share their thoughts, their feelings within a context that they can feel valued and worthwhile. Having positive relationships with adults and caregivers, that is one of the key prognostic features when it comes down to emotional wellness. So for all of us, we have children in our sphere of life. Let's make sure to plant positive seeds, speak blessings into the lives of the children who we come in contact with, because we frequently don't know the lives that these children are living. And if we can lighten their load and add a little color, a smile to their lives, it can make all the difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we all want to give answers for that. But just before we answer that question, we are now going to go to a break where we'll have another song by Sarah Watson.
Who is he? Who's the mightiest of all? Who is he? Creation trembles at his call. Who is he? The lowly sacrifice, who paid the victim's price. His name is Jesus. Jesus, from the Father's own right hand. Jesus, Son of God and Son of Man. Jesus, who died and rose again. Jesus, he's the Lion and the Lamb. Who is he with a power none can tame? Who is he that every foe would fear his name? Who is he who was humbly led away to suffer that dark day? His name is Jesus. Jesus, from the Father's own right hand. Jesus, Son of God and Son of Man. Jesus, who died and rose again. Jesus, he's the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, he's the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, he's the Lamb that was slain. He's the Lion that reigns, my Savior and King, both the same. Who is he with the eyes that burn like fire? Who is he? All the wonder he inspires. Who is he who bore my guilt and shame for those who gone astray? His name is Jesus. Jesus, from the Father's own right hand. Jesus, Son of God and Son of Man. Jesus, who died and rose again. Jesus, he's the Lion and he is Jesus, from the Father's own right hand. Jesus, Son of God and Son of Man. Jesus, who died and rose again. Jesus, he's the Lion
the Lion and the Lamb. Thank you for staying with us here at Mind Your Health. And the question that was asked was, how do we enhance children's mental health? And I just want to come right off that song there to say that I think we should allow children to tap into things that they're passionate about and things that they're good at. And for a lot of children, especially in our Jamaican society, music is one of those things. They love listening to music, they love writing music, and so that would be one of the things that I would suggest, allowing them to tap into their passions and to develop those passions.
All right. In addition to that, I am being a part of Pathfinder. Camping was everything for me. The nature hikes, the walks, the different activities. So as young adults or young adolescents, I would say it would be important that they engage in some sort of activity in order for them to be able to express themselves as well.
And to get in touch with nature.
Yeah.
I loved all of those activities when I went to camp. And for me, I also managed camp as the director. So I made sure that the children got all of the outdoor activities and things that they weren't used to at home. So when the 5 days were up, they would say, we're not ready for go home yet, we're enjoying this because they get to experience some outdoor nature. They get to see things that they might not have seen in Kingston because we're from Kingston and we don't have certain things. We don't have the country lifestyle and even simple things like the stars. And so they don't see them in Kingston because we have too much light. So getting them out there, it's a different feel for them. And sometimes they do open up at that point, right? Another thing that I wanted to touch on is how we speak to the children. And it is very important that we look at it because sometimes we don't realize what we're doing. I remember I had a child come to me, right? And it was a simple thing, I went over and I stood over her and I did this. Now, she was having an issue, right? And she jumped back. Why? Because she used to somebody barking at her like that, right? She's used to somebody coming and hitting her just like that, right? So they come over her and they and talk to her like that. So what I realized that I had to do is that I had to get down on eye level with her, talk eye level to her. And when I did that, no, she was willing to open up and she did see that I'm making eye contact and that I'm genuinely interested in the situation that is going on. A lot of us don't realize that as adults, when we stand over children like that, sometimes they feel intimidated, right? And they're scared to open up, right? Because they don't want you over them like that. They want to see that you're willing to look them in the eye and find out what is really going on with them, right? So that is one thing that I notice with these children. And a lot of them are being abused that way, right? The parent come over them and like, me are the parent, you're the me, and, in the face and pointing up and lick the head and those things, right? So they're now intimidated and they're afraid. They're afraid because that is abuse in a sense, right? So we have to realize that some of the actions that we are taking are hurting the children, and so we have to step back from that and start doing things that will make them feel healthy and safe, right? So we can start with that. That's a simple thing.
Yes, and that as you said, that also builds trust. Because if it is that a parent is able to go or even look eye to eye, go at the eye to eye level, they will be able to say, all right, this child will be able to say, I can trust this person. If it is that I'm going through a particular problem, I can trust this person, and so on.
And I think too, one of the gifts that we can give our children to increase their resilience is nurturing positive relationships in the family. So giving them an opportunity to see family relationships that are positive, that are growth promoting, that are loving, that can really provide a context where children can feel safe, can feel loved, and can witness the expression of appropriate love. Because often as they age and they're seeking connections and intimacies, They're frequently replicating partnerships that they have observed elsewhere. And so one of the gifts that we can give them that can reduce their vulnerability to abusive intimate relationships is for us to demonstrate to them appropriate boundaries and expressions within family relationships, between parents, between siblings, at church as well. Because often we can be more loving in our expressions with each other, even when there is disagreement. Church needs to feel safe for children because of how adults are speaking to the children, even when they're being reprimanded and when they're being corrected. All of this, how the community feels at church, at school, at home is critical in relation to fostering emotional wellness. Also, I think it's important for us to remember that school is the equivalent of work for children as for adults. So for the major space of identity and functioning for adults is work, and the equivalent for children is school. And so when children are having learning challenges, when they're having difficulties with social relationships at school, it can really impact their feelings of self-efficacy, and it can impact their emotional wellness. And so it's important for the parents, for the teachers to watch for any indicators that the children are struggling. Because when they're struggling and they're behind in academic tasks, it can generalize to their sense of themselves in other areas of their life. So that's one gift that we can do. Because often I interface and have clients who are teen boys and girls, and often they resort to sexual acting out behaviors or conduct related problems or substance abuse problems because they have decided that they cannot succeed in other areas of their life. They have given up on school and excelling in those areas because they have consistently failed, and they've heard their parents and teachers speak negatively about them and their worth because of their challenges in these areas. And so we need to provide more support that they can feel successful and get connected to passions and do well in other areas of their life that can help them to strive.
Right, right. And Dr. Atkinson, as we wrap up the discussion this evening, could you just lead us into, for somebody who may be wondering, does my child have a mental health issue? What are steps that they can take to understand more about their child, or what should they do in aiding their child?
I think it's really important for us to, if you are concerned that your child has a mental health concern or a developmental concern, it's important for you to talk with your child. If, for example, you've noticed dramatic shifts in behaviors, hopefully you have invested in a close, safe relationship with your child, and you can talk with them. And having had that conversation, you can talk with their physician, with their guidance counselor, with a psychologist, a mental health provider to get additional support around first being able to identify what is really at play and what might be some treatment interventions that can be useful. Because you're going to be the first person to notice the shifts, but you might not be able to put it in a wider context of all that is going wrong. And so the first thing is to listen to your gut. When you notice a shift, the temptation is to minimize it. But let's intervene ASAP by getting help from the practitioners. Can start with a physician, can start with a psychologist, a counselor, a child guidance clinic, just so that you're having more eyes on a child who might urgently need some intervention.
Okay, thank you. As we close, any last thoughts from each guest and Dr. Atkinson? Sister Gunness, you want to go first? Last thoughts?
All right, so at the end of the day, I think that what parents should really be doing is trying to let your child feel loved and safe. Once you do that, your child will always come to you to discuss matters that are bothering them, right? So try to be one of those parents that listens actively to your child, right? Don't brush what they're saying aside, because brushing it aside might lead to future problems, right? You might never know what they're saying might be very relevant to issues that are bothering them now, that needs to be dealt with now before they get older. And brushing it aside could cause future damage for them. So let us be safe. Let us keep our children safe and let them feel like we are trustworthy. And do not break their confidence in you. Be confidential in what they say, no matter what they say to you, unless it is something that you cannot handle, and you explain to them that you're going to need to get assistance with helping them, so that they know that you're not just going and telling their business, because children still are entitled to their privacy, right? And you have to respect their privacy as well. So let us just keep those things in mind.
Okay.
As a male looking forward to having a daughter when I become married and everything, one of the things that I've always thought about or even fantasized about is having father-daughter dates. This will help. This would, well, and not even just father-daughter dates, but with the father actually practicing chivalry. I remember an episode ago that I remember that the issue was about abuse in relationships. It actually starts here. It actually starts through the adolescent stage, where if it is that a father is able to show his daughter that these are the things that are acceptable in a relationship, then it is that the daughter would not be prone to actually want to go in a relationship that will be termed as abusive. So I would say plan activities with your children, spend time with them, and another thing, pray with them, pray into them, pray over them, cover them, and let them actually hear the prayer. Let them know, let them hear that you're praying for them, because that's one of the things that really helps them to know that you really care about them.
Absolutely. Dr. Atkinson?
I think we've said this several times, but it's worth emphasizing. Children are not just miniature adults. They are developing in all the important ways. And so it's important for us, the adults in their lives, to exercise patience, to mentor and to model appropriate ways of problem solving, of caring, of sharing. They have their own thoughts, their own strengths, their own goals. And so in all the different spaces, at church, through children's ministry, through Sabbath school, at school, as the teachers are interfacing with their students, and in the home, let's provide more spaces that children can show up in their vulnerability, in their weaknesses and their questions, and feel secure in just being themselves and knowing that they are loved first and foremost by God, and that the parents and teachers are seeing them as a gift from God who they are charged with stewarding. God is able, even when a child is grappling with developmental or mental health concerns, to provide them with a rich life that can impact the community positively. So let's speak words of encouragement and promise into their lives. Let's be vigilant to any signs of people wanting to hurt them or abuse them, and be willing to intervene to make them thrive in the way that God predestined them to be. And because they are our future, our present and our future.
That's it. There is nothing more to be said on that. I think you all covered it all. Thank you so much for being with us here on Mind Your Health, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mind Your Health. Listen, right now, if you haven't yet subscribed to EJC's YouTube channel, take your time, scroll on a little bit to that red button that says subscribe, click on that, and then click on the bell and select all so you do not miss any of our programs. We have so many more discussions that we're going to have on Mind Your Health, so we want you to stay tuned and to be notified when we go live. Thank you for joining us here. on Mind Your Health. And remember that there is no health without emotional health. Thank you.
Sometimes your body might betray you, and you may have so much to lose. But if you pay attention and you just take some action, you realize it's all in your mind. It's in your mind, so mind your health. It's in your mind, so mind your health. Your physical is essential, but your mind is super special. So mind your health.